finishing getting the live stream set up, but now we're ready. Hello, everyone. I was going to say good morning, but I know it's lunchtime. Thank you all for being here. I'm Michelle Dilworth. I'm the director of Foundation Center West, and we're so pleased that you are here and interested and spending your lunchtime with us to talk about taking the mystery out of moves management. This is kind of a follow-on program from a really great major gifts program that many of these panelists and Lisa Hoffman have put together earlier this year, and so we're pleased to see the interest, and we're really happy to have you here. So welcome to you, and also those on our live stream audience. Great to have you here. Just a little bit about Foundation Center West. We're a nonprofit organization, a regional hub of Foundation Center, which is a nonprofit which is really working to help connect nonprofits to the resources they need to thrive and really help expand knowledge about what's going on in philanthropy. So we're happy to have you here, and if you want, you can go upstairs to our 6th floor library if you haven't been there yet. And if not, you can look and find out more at foundationcenter.org. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome our moderator, Lisa Hoffman, consultant and coach, and for me, most personally, what I really appreciate, Lisa, is her leading our advisory committee here at Foundation Center West. She's been a wonderful leader and partner with me, working to help make sure that we're providing the services that you all need. And thank you for all your work with that, and we're happy to have you for this program. And I'll turn it over to you to introduce everyone else.
Thank you. And friend. I'm just saying. We were just having a little huddle and reflecting on the fact that we're all super excited to be here together and with you, and also to offer a topic that I've done lots of these kinds of programs for more years than I'm going to share, and I've never seen one on moves management. So we're hoping that you really get some insight into the process and the practice. And so I want to introduce our panel and just give you a little warning, because the panel is almost twice as big as in March. So if you offer to help me, you probably will end up here. As Brenda and Ziba will testify to. So to my immediate right is Sharnaz Boga, who is Associate Director of Leadership Gifts at the American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California, an organization I, for one, really appreciate extra right now. Mm-hmm. And what I want to say about our panel is their bios are on the announcement on the website for this program, so please read them. I just want to say that I chose each of these individuals because they are consummate professionals. They've been in the trenches with a lot of different organizations, deeply experienced, and also really, really practical. So some of you are with tiny groups where there's just you, or maybe you and another person doing development. And so how do you approach major gifts and moves management? And some of you are with much larger organizations with a greater number of development team members. And our panelists can respond to every. So get all your needs. You can get your refrigerator filled, and you can get your entertainment needs met. Katiti. So I want to tell you, I'm going to use to talk audience. Most number, they will be relevant to as many people as possible, and we'll probably do 1 or 2 per segment. So just keep the questions coming, and there's more blank paper if you need it. And I think that's it. Did I forget anything? I think that's it. Okay. So we are going to start with Sharnaz, Katiti, and Lee. And I'm going to ask each of you to tell us a little bit about your organizations, the mission, the budget, what your overall development goal is, and your major gifts goal. And we're also, I'm sure, all curious what amount indicates a major gift for you.
So hello, everyone. Is this on? Can you all hear me? Yeah, hey. So first of all, it's such an honor to be here. I'm so delighted to be asked back after the March panel. The ACLU is, well, we've been a bit busy recently. I don't know if y'all have noticed that. But we have, and so we are, the Northern California affiliate is the largest affiliate of the national organization. We have about 170,000 members here in Northern California. Our organizational budget for fiscal year 18-19 is 24 million. Our development goal is 18 million. That does not include special campaign gifts. We are in a campaign at the moment, and we're not including those gifts in this goal for now. Our leadership gifts goal, which is our equivalent of major gifts, is kind of the highest level of gifts that we raise, is 7.2 million. And the dollar amount that we consider leadership gifts to be is $25,000 and above, with a heavy concentration on $100,000 and above. And if we have donors or with the capacity to give more than $250,000, those really go into our executive director's portfolio.
So I'm Lee Illian with the Alameda County Community. Oh yes, that. I'm Lee Illian. Is that on? With the Alameda County Community Food Bank. We have an overall budget of about 70 million, but that includes donated food. Our operating budget is just shy of $20 million, and our major gifts budget is $2.5 million out of individual giving, which is about $8.5 million. We have another about $5 million in corporate and foundation gifts, some bequests that are inching up on $500,000. And I don't even know what I forgot. Anjali?
How big is a major gift?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we are at 5,000, and that is relatively new here. It was 1,500, and we just decided that that was really not possible for portfolios. We needed to reduce our portfolios and actually have identified the right people for portfolio. Thanks.
You can hear me? Great. Just to repeat, my name is Katiti Crawford. I'm with SF Jazz, and we consider ourselves to be the largest presenter of jazz music within the United States. We are about jazz is at the core of what we do, and we focus on music that has influenced jazz as well as music that has jazz's influence. So it's a very wide range. We do presentations, education, and also we curate and ask people to compose new pieces. Our annual budget right now is $19 million. We have gone from being a small organization, we're now, I would say, at the medium size. And our development goal this year is $5.8 million. And that's about 30% of our budget. We are a very healthy organization in terms of earned revenue. Major gifts, $3.9 million. And right now, a major gift, we're moving from 5,000 to 10,000. Our goal this year really is to kind of up that ante, and that's 10,000 annually, or a one-time gift of 10 to 25,000. That doesn't include an endowment campaign that is really in a quiet phase. I hit all the points?
You did.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the rest of our program. Shernaz, Katiti, and Lee are going to share with us case studies of a prospect or a donor that they have cultivated through Moves Management, how they've worked with their teams, the decisions they've made around Moves Management, and the resulting gift. Before they do that, Brenda and Ziba are going to frame the discussion by talking a little bit about what is Moves Management. And I've asked them to share with us 3 success factors from their wide variety and depth of experience. And then at about 12:55, we're going to form breakout groups, and hopefully each of you has a prospect or a donor in mind that you'd like to apply moves management to. And the purpose of the breakout groups is to actually workshop them. So you'll have the opportunity with the people in your breakout group, led by each of our panelists, to share about your prospect, talk about what kind of activities are available at your organization, and then really strategize. How would a team look at a prospect? What have they given, or where are they in their cultivation? And what makes sense in terms of next moves to move them, to deepen their engagement and move them towards yes. So think about that, the breakout group that's coming, and I will ask Brenda and Ziba to talk to us a little bit about moves management.
Thanks, Lisa. Can you hear me? Okay, so I'll start just by sharing the definition of moves management that Brenda and I came up with. It's a bit wordy, but and I'm sure it's not original, but we believe that moves management is a system of cultivation moves with a major donor prospect designed to deepen their engagement with a nonprofit organization, ultimately leading to a special gift solicitation for support where they would like to have an impact. So in a nutshell, and just to reiterate, I'd say it's deepening donor engagement by adding high-touch moves, leading to a personally meaningful gift. And now I'll turn it over to Brenda.
Hi, everyone. We had some fun talking about this the other day, and there's a lot of different words we can use, and some of you may be very familiar with the donor cycle. I've got one that I pulled off the internet. It's a circle, and it kind of can spiral because you really have to start with identification. What makes you think this person might be a good prospect for a major gift? They've either revealed something personal, like their special Tuscan getaway that they own and haven't invited you to yet, or they've made a major gift or a meaningful, significant gift. So identification would be the first step, and then some of us call the next step qualification, so others might call it discovery. And there's probably other words besides that we could use, but then it's really trying to learn more about this person. And you can do some of that with Google, you can do some of that with wealth management, and you can do some of that, and what I recommend most is getting to know people. Nothing replaces a personal relationship. And that leads into the cultivation. I mean, some of that is very seamless. It could be one meeting that leads to another dinner, that leads to a tour, that leads to, I mean, we'll talk more about all of those activities or touches. And all of that is to try to get to a successful solicitation. So really trying to understand what this person is really the most passionate about, getting them engaged in the mission of your organization, to the point that when you do make an ask, a significant ask, that they will say yes. And then after that, you want to continue to be friendly and warm and steward them, although that generally leads right back into cultivation. I got an email, I'm on an email list with a group that sends out blog entries, and they said, never steward your donors, which was a little alarming, because of course you thank them and you steward, but really your stewardship and cultivation after the donor gives their first gift is pretty much identical. I mean, you're always wanting to keep them engaged and keep them close. So, which is why I call it a spiral. Once you qualify or discover that they are a good prospect, then you continue really to cultivate to get to another gift, to cultivate to get to another gift.
Okay, so it was for the three main success factors to moves management. We just decided to come up with the first three things that came to mind, and then we have some stuff at the bottom that I'll share just briefly. But the first thing we thought you absolutely have to have is a system for tracking your moves. And that, nowadays there's some really sophisticated database functionalities that you can use that'll prompt you for your next move, that'll spit out reports and tell you all the moves you've made within a week, a month, a quarter, a year. And if you're on a team of gift officers, it can do that for everyone. But if you don't have that, or if you're in the process of getting it, don't let that be a stopping point, because you can go to the good old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet and just put the donors in for, just like a mail merge format, their contact information, ID number, address, phone, email, and then maybe some attributes about their giving, highest previous contribution and that date, most recent contribution, cumulative giving, and then just columns, most recent move, next move, next move, and you can track. And I think it's important to say, don't just make moves for the sake of making moves, but these moves are within a strategy that you've started to develop from your discovery, and really qualifying them to move them towards something that would be special to them. And a gift that could be a capital gift, an increased annual gift, a challenge match, a planned gift, or best of all, a blended gift, which is some of each of those.
I got a 2-minute warning.
What's that?
We got a 2-minute warning.
Okay,
so-
go ahead.
Okay, we're going to speed through some of this in the interest of time, because my next one is dedicating time to moves management. This is another success factor. And I know it's a big challenge for those of you who are not full-time major gift officers, because obviously that's your job. But I think for those like me who have been development directors and managing and juggling every bit of it, finding time to do it is most critical. It's not just about the lunches and tours and shows. It's about the strategy. It's about really following up. It's keeping in touch. It's keeping donors informed and engaged in between the visits. So dedicating time is really a success factor. And the last one is a system of prioritization. Obviously, you may have limited time, so if you have 500 prospects, how do you find the top 10 that you want to start with? Put it in bite-sized pieces so that you can really keep the moves management moving, and without getting too sidetracked by other things.
And just to add, it has to be the right match, so let the donor lead you to what would be special for them. It has to be personalized to that donor. There has to be movement. You can't be stuck in cultivation for 2 years, which can happen. I mean, there's special cases, but in general, you have to move them through the cycle. And you have to have a pipeline, because not all of your solicitations are going to end up in an actual gift. And you have to be willing to accept rejection, with the caveat that no may mean not now and not necessarily never.
Thank you. And I just want to remind you to write your questions down legibly. Printing is preferable, and Michelle will be collecting them and feeding them to me, and I'll be choosing the ones that are most relevant to the topic and that I think will be most applicable to a majority of you all. So can we start with you, Katiti? To shake things up a little bit.
Okay.
So Katiti is going to give us an example of a prospect or donor that she moved up in SF Jazz successfully. Thank
Okay.
you.
I did want to start and say that I've worked everywhere to a place where I was the only person and I was in a closet, to really large organizations, and I did find a way to kind of implement this in all different types of organizations. But I'm going to start with, I have to give him a name, so it's going to be TR. So I started at SF Jazz, and I did have a database where I had some information about the donor, how many years he had been a member, and just some basic information, but not a lot. So I went through the first step of basically identifying a prospect based on what I considered to be important, which was affinity, really like the organization, access. He did come to shows, so I had a way of getting in touch with him, and then he had the ability. So I did some research to see if he had capacity, and what that meant was just looking, Googling him. So it was very basic. I didn't have a research database at the time, so I identified this person, and then my qualification period, I basically asked him if he would like to get together for a drink before a show. He said yes. So right away, I'm like, oh, he's qualified. He wants to engage. So then we sat down and I got to know him. I just asked him some basic questions. He had been giving, he was a member, so I shouldn't say he was giving, he was a member for about 10 years. And no one had ever asked him for a major gift based on what I could see. So I got to know him over a drink. It was very simple. And I asked basic questions, which I call discovery questions. Why do you like SF Jazz? Why do you go to shows? Found out a little bit more about his history. And I thought, okay, I've gotten enough information. Now I can start to figure out where he might be interested in giving more, since I already knew that he had the capacity. Now I've done this with other people where the coffee or the drink ended up with them not really being interested in furthering, or there wasn't anything that was like there. So I kind of moved them out of my prospect pool and moved them into disqualified them from a major gifts portfolio. So qualification period. So then I looked at what my thought was, looked at the first, so I said, okay, so I need some people, more executive calendar out there. It's really hard.
And I want to add to that, meetings. So if you're thinking, well, that's great, the food bank, people can tour the actual facility, which is amazing. Use ACLU.
Couple, they were fairly young, solicitation with a board member involved. So.
Thank you. And I have a couple of general questions, which, Shernaz, after you present your case, I'll ask all of you, Brenda and Ziba included. And I just want to encourage each of you to send your questions up to us. Thank you.
So hello. So for our case, we're going to get into an airplane and a time capsule.
Oh, yay.
And we're going to fly across the country to Houston, Texas, and go back in time to about 2003, 2004. So this is clearly a case study from a previous job. I used to work at the University of Texas Health Science Center, and we were in a capital campaign for a new building and a new research center. We already had an existing research center, which was called the IMM, but it was in a much smaller facility, and we knew we wanted to increase our capacity to hire more people, expand our programming, and we really needed a new facility for that. And we had a very visionary president at the time who was just absolutely committed to this and corralled all of us to work on this campaign with him. So we're going to talk about two donors, John and Jerry, which are not their real names, obviously. And Jerry was an existing donor. He used to give us $50,000 through a family foundation annually. And he directed his gift to the program in cardiology. He had a very deep personal interest in cardiology. He had heart disease in his family. And he also had a close relationship with our president, who I will call Dr. W. And so they used to meet regularly. And during one of these visits, Jerry indicated to Dr. W that his son John was starting to get very interested in taking a more prominent position on the board of their family foundation, and he was interested himself in passing on some of these responsibilities to John. John was much younger. He worked with him in the family business, and I think he felt like this was a good time for them to transition some of the philanthropic decision-making to John as well. So this information was passed on to us by Dr. W, and Jerry was in my portfolio. And so I kind of had to figure out a strategy that really worked with both of them. With Jerry, it was more stewardship, and with John, it was really cultivation because he didn't know anything about our organization. I didn't have any idea how active he was in actually the decision-making for the $50,000 we got every year. So it was really more, with Jerry, my first move was to speak with him to really kind of honor his position with our organization, the fact that he had a long-standing relationship with us, and also to get more feedback from him about where he saw the foundation going, how prominent of a role he thought that John would have. And so it was a very successful meeting. We had that conversation, and he said he would speak with John about visiting with me and kind of, seeing where we could go with a conversation about future giving. I guess one of the things we haven't really talked about yet are foreground moves and background moves with moves management. I will use foreground move interchangeably with major moves. When we were working on this, we used to say major moves just because that's what our database said. And background moves, some of you might be familiar with it, are really the ones that are not very personalized. The major moves are the ones that are much more personalized, where you're really kind of standing face to face, or you have an individual contact with the donor, where a background move is much more general and kind of, might cover several donors rather than just directed to the one. So the background move that I made at this point was just very simple, just to make sure that John was included on all of our mailing lists and all of our invitations. Jerry had been getting everything so far, but we wanted to make sure that John was included as well. So that was an important background move, to make sure that he was getting all that information. My meeting with John was a discovery call. I mean, essentially, because I had never met him. He really didn't know very much, I don't think, about our organization. He certainly didn't know much about the capital campaign. And so I really wanted, my goal for that meeting was to really figure out where we ranked in his philanthropic priorities, assuming that from now on he would be the primary decision maker for the family. And I really discovered that he was an equal opportunity donor, which was really interesting. We were kind of smooshed in there with all these other organizations in the city that he was interested in supporting. So they supported the arts, and they supported K through 12 education, and they supported higher ed, of course, and medical research. And so after this meeting, I had to really pause and try and figure out how we were going to separate ourselves from the rest of the pack. And so it kind of took some thinking beyond, because, I'm sure he felt like they were being very generous. It kind of, you had to kind of steer the strategy towards generous is great, but we want significant, and we want investment in the capital campaign. And it helped, and some of you might have this with your organizations, it helped to have kind of the ultimate perfect move in mind. And for us, that was the site visit. It had been very successful with other donors for the capital campaign. And what it was we invited the donor to the site of the current research institute, where there was, there were labs that we could tour with them. We introduced them to some of our top line scientists. The president was always there, would talk about his vision. After the tour of the labs, we would convene to the conference room, and there would be a lunch, and there was a very convenient little model of the new building right there, to which, of course, the president would refer, and we would talk about the campaign. But when you have that kind of visit, it's hard to top it, right? I mean, once you have that, you almost are compelled to make the ask. It's really difficult after that to do anything that is more meaningful for a donor. And so you have to kind of time it. And so we knew that's what we wanted to do, but I had to kind of work backwards from that with my moves to figure out how are we going to get there. We didn't want to do it too early in the cultivation cycle and risk getting a no. And so that's where I believe you kind of have to work with what you have. And what we had was his annual gift. And we had to be a little creative. So I spoke with him. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I've got a lot to get through. I spoke with him about whether I could use him as my resource for the next application. Every year we would submit a proposal and a report on the impact of the previous gift, and he said absolutely. And during the course of that, we had a couple of really substantive conversations about the Health Science Center in general, and that's where I feel like you can kind of be a little sneaky. I mean, I used to call him to talk about the proposal ostensibly, but I would frame it in terms of, well, the cardiology program is great, but if you invest in research, it could be even greater. And this is our budget, but wow, there are all these other institutions in the medical center that have these budgets that are that much greater, but wouldn't it be great if we could recruit some of these people to come and work with us in our new institute? And that's where I think he got hooked, because when we started talking of recruitment and we started talking about what it entails to really recruit some of these world-class scientists to come over to your institution, we started talking about endowments. And we started talking about faculty endowments and how important that is to have those as part of your recruitment package. And he was hooked. He did not really understand endowments. He was a businessman. He didn't understand endowments, but he kept asking me questions about it. At one point, he thought they were like mutual funds, and I'm like, not quite. I called my husband, who's in finance. Are they like mutual funds? No, they're not really like mutual funds. But it was great because he was engaging in a conversation, and the things that really appealed to him were, one, they were in perpetuity, long-term planning, long-term investment. Two, we could name them for his family or anyone he wanted to name them for. Three, they were really important in helping us recruit scientists to come and to kind of take us to the next level. So I think those were the things that really caught his attention. I still felt it was too early to invite him for a visit to the site, the site visit. I kind of thought, okay, we've got him interested in endowments, but we need to talk more about his strengthen that relationship with the institution. So we invited him to something that we call the President's Lunch, which was a speaker series where we had one of our scientists speaking about the IMM. And we very strategically placed him on the president's table and assigned him a seat next to a board member. And that's kind of, again, where I had to pause and evaluate, because based on the feedback from the board member is how I could kind of direct the next stage in my strategy, which I sort of knew what I wanted to do, but it was a big move. And that was to invite him to join our board. Well, the feedback was great. The board member said he really enjoyed the lunch. He seemed really taken by the IMM. And so we had to handle the ask for him to join the board very carefully, because we did have Jerry, and we didn't want to upset Jerry. We didn't want him to feel like we're not asking you to be on the board. We want your son to be on the board. So the way we managed that was for the board chair to call Jerry and say, we would be so honored to have your family represented on our board. Thank you for supporting us for so long. And we just left it at that. And in a few days, John called back and said that he would love to join the board. Thank you for the invitation. And by the way, he renewed his annual gift at $75,000, which was great. Love that. So the next part of that was that, okay, he came to the board meeting. Again, I was pretty strategic about the timing of the invitation for him to join the board, because it was just before one of our board meetings at which we were giving a pretty detailed update. Our president had given me a little pushback on inviting him to join the board, because he was like, well, why can't you just invite him to attend the board meeting? And I was like, well, we have to, going back to that whole point of separating ourselves from the other organizations, right? He was young, but he hadn't been invited to join any of those boards. He wasn't on any other board in the city that I could tell. And so I felt this was something that would really set us apart if he accepted, because it was also a fundraising board. I mean, he would realize we weren't just asking him to be on the board for the sake of being on the board. He had commitments and he had obligations. And so for all those reasons, I think I managed to persuade the president and my VP of development that, we needed to give up one precious spot for the board and invite him, and he did. So the board meeting went very well. We invited him and Jerry to the site visit. The site visit went really well. There was a period of frustration in between for me because, like all of us do, I'm sure we've all encountered this in our jobs, we kept scheduling the site visit and it kept getting canceled, and we kept scheduling and it kept getting canceled. And at one point, I almost thought to myself, kind of, is he playing us in a way? He's got the board position, which I think he really was very honored to be asked. They feel they have increased their annual gift to us, so they probably feel like they've made that major investment. Are they trying to kind of just avoid the whole site visit thing? So then I did another move, which was to have the president write them a letter. Those days, we wrote letters, didn't send emails. So I had him write him a letter just to say, we are so delighted that you've agreed to come to the site visit. We understand that there's some challenge involved in scheduling, but we are hopeful that we can work it out, and we look forward to seeing you. And I thought that was important because although Jerry had that very strong relationship with the president, John didn't. And I think John needed that touch. Well, anyway, time's up. Happy ending, happy ending, surprise. They came to the site visit. We kind of knew that because of my conversation with him about endowments, we knew what we were going to ask him for. The president asked them to make a significant contribution. They asked what it was, and we said a $500,000 gift to endow a chair in cardiology. And they were like, we'll think about it, send us a proposal, send them a proposal, which I personally took over and handed over in his office. And they made us the gift. And so now we fly back to San Francisco. Many years later.
Thank you. And there's a variety of organizations that you represent, different sizes, different opportunities that you can offer to donors, and some are more modest than the Food Bank, SF Jazz, the University of Texas. But this is about thinking on the strategic level and how do you adapt. And when we get to the breakout groups, what I wanted to let you know is that I'll be leading one for people with smaller groups. There's a number of questions. How do you do this in a small group? As well as general questions you might have if you don't want to workshop an actual prospect. But more about that in a minute. So we have a few questions, and I wanted to first start with a general question that I have no doubt most or all of you have, which is, how do you involve the ED and board who somehow don't always identify as fundraisers? Anyone have that question too? Raise your hand. It's hard to believe. So maybe Brenda or Ziba, since you've been quiet for a bit now.
Well, I'll take
Go for it.
Okay. At the ACLU of Northern California, our executive director is committed to moves management, and he has every week 2 hours of time blocked out on his calendar for moves. And he has his own portfolio, which is managed by the Director of Leadership Gifts, but we also have the opportunity to go to him, and oftentimes this meeting gets moved around, but he holds 4 hours a week for us, and he makes phone calls, he sends emails, he handwrites notes, and it really is extremely helpful. So it may be 4 hours a week for your ED if you're a smaller organization is too much, but think about, and maybe it's not your executive director if your board chair is someone who's very involved with helping, but there's ways to at least make the commitment. Again, it's about making the time.
Well, and since you talk so greatly about the ED, I'll talk a little bit about the board, which is a whole other conundrum, as I'm sure heard a lot of sighs when you hear 2 hours a week. Wow, that would be great. Well, a board is a whole nother ballgame, and I think that it has to start in the recruiting process, and that we as development professionals, whatever level and whatever size organization you represent, have to be involved in the recruiting process to make sure you've got some allies on your board that understand the work that you're doing and that they are they're partners in this. They're ambassadors for the organization. And again, the one size does not fit all with your board. You cannot expect your board to do, every board member to do the same thing, but you find your allies who are willing to come on a lunch with you because they're very social and very passionate about the organization. You find the board member who actually has a few people to introduce you to and get them engaged. I mean, you have to kind of work with your board members, I find, and I advise, much like you do with your donors. You have to find their focal point, their happy place, really, in being a part of this work. And some of them may never be a part of this work. It may be, oh yeah, I'll make a thank you call, or I'll show up at an event, I'll wear my name tag, I'll shake a few hands, but you can't force people into it. But find your allies, and maybe they can help inspire their colleagues sometimes and turn them around. So a lot of different strategies you can use, but to me, it starts with the recruiting process. I have a lot of clients I've talked to who their ED has told the board, oh, come on the board. You don't have to do any fundraising. So that's a problem. And there's a lot of ways in which you can try to solve that, but we don't have time for that.
Can I just add one thing? It's also really helpful if your board has committees. And so you might think about splitting your board members up into committees and having a development committee. And so you really only attract those board members that are interested in fundraising to that small development committee. That helps sometimes.
And I would just add that I think focusing on relationship building and door opening can really be helpful with reluctant fundraisers, because fundraising is really, the end point before beginning the cycle again. But if board members, if your ED can help with introductions, with building the relationship, usually one can partner them with someone who will do the actual ask. And I think relationship building is, at least for some people, a little less daunting than raising money. So we have a question for Katiti. Oh, she's perked up. And then we'll form our breakout groups, and there might be time to answer a few more of the group questions at the end. So Katiti, for your $50,000 donor, what happened after? How did you move from a special gift to annual gift, and did the level change?
So as Brenda talked about, stewardship, as I said this yesterday, it's like stewardship is just another word for cultivation. So of course, as soon as he made the gift, thanked him, I thanked him. I had, leadership thank him in a variety of ways, personal notes, phone calls, and then he knew that I was going to come back to him eventually. He was already giving an annual gift of about $5,000, and he made this $50,000 gift, which he paid over 2 years, 25. And as soon as he made the gift, I committed to the gift. I said, okay, I have to come up with a new plan. What do I want next? And is it going to take me a year to 2 years? So you continue to give. Part of the proposal was to continue to give his annual gift at $5,000. So I got that in there, because sometimes people are like, I made a big gift, you don't need to bother me again. And so he understood. Like I said, I plotted what did I want the next thing to do for him? I didn't know at that point. But I said, okay, I'm going to create a plan for a year. And in addition to thanking him, started to learn more about what else he was interested in, another artist he was interested in. I just spent time getting to know him. Once again, lunches. Sometimes I'd meet him for dinner. He had joined a new club, and I went to visit him at the club. And we sort of got to know each other. I knew a little bit more about his family. And from there, we started to build a relationship that was more on par with how the organization is doing. So we'd get together for a social visit, and I would say, oh, by the way, we just, now we're going to do 440 shows versus 400 shows next year. And as that first year after the gift progressed, I started to get to know a bit more about his family, and I realized that he had 2 daughters, both were adults, and one daughter had just gotten married and was about to have a child. So I started to kind of integrate things about music education into the conversation, knowing that he had learned how to play the ukulele when he was in his 20s, and he'd always wanted to be an artist. I think you know who I'm talking about. So I started to ask, hey, do you think that she would want to bring, your grandson to a concert? There are certain concerts where you can bring babies to, even get them an opportunity to start playing on instruments. So I started to try to find a way to integrate the family. And since the daughters aren't really interested in the music, I found another way that they might be interested. So he started to invite them to attend family matinees with him and a couple of different workshops. And that's where we are right now. We're still in that kind of middle phase, and I've already realized the ukulele, this guy talks about it all the time, and he talks about ukulele and jazz, so I've already realized, okay, we're going to find a way to focus on that for the next 2 years, and get to know a little bit more about the artists that he likes, and kind of work toward an endowment gift. But we're in that middle stage of continuing to develop the relationship and continuing to thank him.
And thank you. So,
Just one more. Just realizing that human services, fundraising in human services is a little bit different than jazz or even ACLU, because people at that level of capacity are not the kind of constituents who you're serving. And so I found, has anyone read 7 Faces of Philanthropy?
Should.
You really discover people's motivation, and you tailor your plan and your approach to their motivation.
Thank you. So thank you to our live stream audience. We're going to let you get on with your day because we're going to form breakout groups. And I'm guessing for those of you with us live, some of you are going to leave, so feel free to do that now. And so in a moment, I'm going to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then each of you will go with your breakout group leader. The plan for the breakout group is hopefully some of you, even all of you, have brought a